It all started on a quiet Tuesday morning in the serene neighborhood of Willow Creek Estates. The air was crisp, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting golden hues over the well-manicured lawns, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees that lined the peaceful streets. It was the kind of neighborhood where life moved at a steady, predictable pace, where neighbors exchanged friendly waves over white picket fences, and where the biggest excitement of the year was the much-anticipated annual block party, an event that brought everyone together for an evening of barbecue, music, and light-hearted conversation. It was the last place anyone would expect a full-blown war over property rights to break out. But that was exactly what was about to happen. The tranquility that had defined Willow Creek for years was about to be shattered in a way no one could have foreseen. I had called Willow Creek home for the past 5 years, and for the most part, it had been everything I could have hoped for. My house was my sanctuary, tucked away at the very end of a private road, far from the bustle of the main neighborhood streets. It was perfect, secluded, quiet, and entirely mine. The road leading to my property was a quarter-mile stretch, a narrow yet well-maintained path winding through the thick canopy of trees, offering a natural barrier of privacy from the rest of the community. More importantly, that road belonged to me. I had paid for it, maintained it, and taken full responsibility for its upkeep. It was the only way in or out of my property, a fact I had never given a second thought to, until now. The trouble began when the Homeowners Association, an entity that was supposed to maintain harmony in the neighborhood, decided it was time to update the community bylaws. The changes, they claimed, were necessary to modernize the neighborhood, to ensure safety, and to keep up with evolving standards. One of the most significant amendments was a new rule that all private roads within the neighborhood had to be accessible to emergency vehicles at all times. On the surface, it seemed like a reasonable enough regulation. After all, who would argue against making sure emergency responders could reach homes in case of a crisis? But as the saying goes, the devil is in the details. And in this case, the details were devastating. The HOA claimed that my private road, the same road I had driven on every single day without issue, did not meet their new accessibility standards. They insisted that for the sake of community safety, I would have to make significant modifications, widen the road, install turnaround spaces, and add multiple signs to mark clear access points. Baker. I was expected to pay for all of it. The cost would be entirely mine to bear, despite the fact that it was my private property. Naturally, I pushed back. My road had never caused any problems before, and I saw no reason why I should have to make expensive changes just because the HOA had suddenly decided to rewrite the rules. More importantly, I knew that as private property, my road should be exempt from their jurisdiction. I made my stance clear in every way possible: formal letters, phone calls, and in-person discussions. But the HOA, led by the ever-persistent Mrs. Gladys Harper, was unwavering in their demands. Weeks passed, then months. What had begun as a minor disagreement quickly escalated into a full-scale battle. Letters turned into tense meetings, where forced politeness barely masked the growing hostility. Meetings evolved into outright arguments, voices raised in frustration as both sides refused to back down. Soon the threats began: fines, legal action, even liens on my property. They were relentless, determined to strong-arm me into submission. But I refused to budge. This was my land, my road, and I would not be bullied into compliance. Then one fateful morning the battle reached a new level. I woke up to find my private road completely blocked. A massive Semitruck, an industrial beast of a vehicle, sat right at the entrance, blocking the only way in or out. The sight was surreal, almost comical in its audacity. I stood there for a moment, dumbfounded, as the reality of the situation sank in. They had done it. They had actually gone through with it. My hands shook with fury as I grabbed my phone and dialed the HOA's number. The line rang only once before it was answered. Willow Creek Estates HO, this is Mrs. Harper speaking, came the voice on the other end, syrupy, sweet, and unbearably smug. What the hell is going on? I demanded, barely able to contain my anger. There's a truck blocking my road. I can't get out of my own property. There was a brief pause, followed by an exaggerated sigh. Oh, hello, dear. We thought it would be best to ensure the safety of the community. Since your road doesn't meet the new standards, we've taken precautionary measures. Precautionary measures? I nearly shouted. You blocked my road. This is private property. Well, dear, she said, her voice laced with false sympathy, until you comply with the new bylaws, we have no choice. Safety first, you know. I had never been so furious in my life. I hung up the phone, my hands gripping the receiver so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, a storm of anger, frustration, and disbelief swirling inside me. This was beyond ridiculous. It was an outright abuse of power, a move so bold and absurd that I could hardly process it. They had trapped me on my own property, using a semi-truck as their weapon of choice, and now they expected me to simply comply? Not a chance. The first thing I did was call the local police, hoping that they would see the sheer insanity of the situation and intervene. But the moment the officer on the other end of the line spoke, my heart sank. I'm sorry, sir, he said in a measured, indifferent tone. This is a civil dispute, not a criminal matter. There's nothing we can do. I argued, tried to explain how the HOA had no right to block my access, but the response was the same. Asterisk, asterisk, their hands were tied. Asterisk, asterisk. Fine. If the police wouldn't help, I'd handle it myself. My next move was to call a tow truck, thinking I could have the massive vehicle hauled away at my own expense. But that idea crumbled as quickly as it had formed. The truck was enormous, far too large for any standard towing service to move. And to make matters worse, the driver was nowhere to be found. It was as if the HOA had planted the truck there and then made the driver disappear into thin air, ensuring that my only escape route remained blocked. Days passed. Then weeks. And the semi-truck remained, a hulking, rusting symbol of the HOA's overreach and arrogance. I was effectively trapped in my own home. The first few days I told myself it would be temporary, that the HOA would realize how extreme their actions were and back down. But they didn't. My once idyllic home had turned into a prison. I couldn't get to work, couldn't run errands, couldn't even take my dog beyond my property for a walk. My food supplies dwindled and I was forced to rely on delivery services, which added to my frustration. How had it come to this? I was angry. But more than that, I was determined. If the HOA thought they could bully me into submission, they were about to learn otherwise. I reached out to a lawyer. Asterisk, asterisk, Sarah Hastings. Asterisk, asterisk, I had heard about her through a friend, and from our very first conversation, I knew she was the right person for the job. Sharp, relentless, and fiercely protective of property rights, she was just as outraged as I was when I told her my story. This is absolutely insane, she said, her voice brimming with confidence. They think they can strong-arm you into compliance, but they just made a huge mistake. Let's take them down. And so the battle truly began. The legal fight was nothing short of brutal. The HOA, now fully entrenched in their position, fought tooth and nail to justify their actions. They paraded around their usual excuses, claiming that they were only acting in the best interest of the community and that their actions were for the sake of safety. They buried us in legal filings, counterclaims, and bureaucratic nonsense, hoping to exhaust us into giving up. But Sarah was a force of nature. She went digging deep. She pulled old property records, zoning laws, and legal precedents. She found loopholes in their argument, contradictions in their claims. And then, in a stroke of brilliance, she unearthed some skeletons in the HOA's closet. It turned out that this wasn't their first power play. They had a history of overstepping their bounds, of bullying homeowners into compliance with outrageous demands. And this time they had gone too far. After months of court dates, depositions, and endless paperwork, the moment of truth arrived. The judge listened to both sides, but in the end there was no doubt. Asterisk, asterisk, we had won. Asterisk, asterisk. The ruling was decisive. The HOA had grossly overstepped their authority. The semi-truck had to be removed immediately. And as if that weren't enough, they were ordered to pay for all my legal fees and compensate me for the inconvenience they had caused. I would have settled for just getting my road back, but now the HOA was getting exactly what they deserved. The day the semi-truck was towed away was one of the sweetest victories of my life. I stood at the entrance of my private road, arms crossed, watching as the massive vehicle, the physical representation of the HOA's arrogance, was hauled off, defeated. The roar of the tow truck's engine was like music to my ears. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, feeling a sense of triumph I hadn't felt in years. But the story didn't end there. The HOA, humiliated and licking their wounds, wasn't done trying to make my life difficult. Their retaliation came in small, petty ways. Suddenly I started receiving fines for the most absurd reasons. Your grass is half an inch too long. Your garden gnome is unsightly and violates aesthetic guidelines. Your trash cans were left out 5 minutes past pickup time. Each notice they sent was dripping with pettiness, their desperation showing in every little attempt to reassert control. But at that point I couldn't have cared less. I had won. No amount of nitpicking or trivial fines could take away the fact that they had lost. And they knew it. In the end, I walked away from the ordeal with a valuable lesson. Sometimes standing up for what's right means going to war even when the odds seem stacked against you. And if you stand your ground, refuse to be intimidated, and fight with everything you have, you just might win. And as for the HOA? Let's just say that from that day forward, they learned never to mess with the person at the end of the private road. The semi-truck incident became the stuff of legend in Willow Creek Estates. It was a cautionary tale for both homeowners and HOAs alike. Mrs. Harper eventually stepped down from the board, and the new leadership was much more reasonable. As for me, I continued to live peacefully at the end of my private road, knowing that I had fought for my rights, and won.